Michael Jordan sees a grocery store call the cops on two black teens. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Michael Jordan's story begins in the unlikeliest of places, the small town of Wilmington, North Carolina. A world away from the skyscrapers of Chicago and the bright lights of the NBA, Wilmington was where Jordan's journey toward basketball greatness was born. But as much as the world knows him as a Chicago Bull, the roots of Michael's basketball obsession lay in his family, his neighborhood, and the playgrounds where every moment on the court was a chance to prove yourself. Growing up in Wilmington, Jordan wasn't initially the tallest, nor the most physically gifted. In fact, his early years in basketball were defined more by ambition than by talent. He was cut from the varsity team during his sophomore year of high school, an event that would come to define his character and drive for the rest of his career. It was a defining moment, one that was as much about defying expectations as it was about learning to conquer failure. Instead of succumbing to disappointment, Jordan used the rejection as fuel. He spent hours on the court, honing his skills with the relentless focus that would become his trademark. By his junior year, he had transformed himself into a player who could no longer be ignored. But Michael's early years weren't just about basketball, they were about family. The influence of his parents, James and Dolores Jordan, cannot be understated. James was a strict but supportive father, often encouraging Michael to push himself, to be better, to never accept less than his best. Michael's bond with his father was special. James would often take him to games, offering guidance and wisdom that would shape Michael's understanding of the game and life itself. Dolores, equally influential, instilled in Michael a sense of humility and responsibility. She was a constant reminder of the value of hard work, integrity, and perseverance. Michael's formative years were marked by a combination of dedication to the game and an intense work ethic. While his peers spent time away from basketball, Jordan was relentless. He would practice alone, perfecting his jump shot, working on his footwork, and developing the competitiveness that would define him in the years to come. But as Michael grew on the court, his identity and his understanding of basketball would expand beyond the small-town gyms he grew up in. In 1981, Jordan moved to the University of North Carolina, where under Coach Dean Smith's tutelage, he further honed his skills. But it wasn't just the technical aspects of the game that Michael excelled in, it was his mindset. Even as a freshman, he played with a chip on his shoulder, knowing he had a lot to prove. His most memorable moment came during the 1982 NCAA championship game when, as a freshman, he hit the game-winning shot against Georgetown, solidifying his place as a future star. This was the start of something special. Jordan's move to Chicago in 1984, after being drafted by the Bulls with the 3rd overall pick, set the stage for his rise to the top. Chicago was a city that would soon learn the true meaning of greatness, and the world would soon realize that Michael Jordan wasn't just another player, he was a phenomenon in the making. But his arrival in Chicago wasn't without its challenges. At first, the city was skeptical. The Bulls were struggling, and despite Jordan's raw talent, he was stepping into a team that hadn't won a championship in over 20 years. Michael knew the stakes were high, but it was more than that, he had a point to prove. His transition into the NBA wasn't seamless. He was often criticized for being too focused on his individual game rather than on team play. But for Jordan, the game had always been about winning, and he would find a way to make it work. It wasn't just Jordan's skill set that immediately stood out, it was his mentality. Unlike many young stars who shied away from the spotlight, Jordan welcomed it. He knew that success in the NBA would be determined not just by talent but by the ability to take control of every game, every moment, and every opportunity. This relentless mindset would become the hallmark of his career. But early on, Jordan faced an uphill battle. Despite his brilliance, the Bulls were not an elite team. They had pieces, yes, but they lacked cohesion. Jordan often found himself carrying the team, putting up dazzling performances while the team around him struggled to find their footing. Yet it was in these early years that his competitive fire burned brightest. Every loss stung, every defeat was a reminder of how far the team, and Jordan, had to go. But instead of backing down, Jordan used it as motivation. By the mid-80s, the Chicago Bulls had become a competitive team, largely thanks to Jordan's individual brilliance. Yet the success of the team still seemed far away. It wasn't until 1989, when the team brought in coach Phil Jackson, that things began to change. Jackson's Zen philosophy and triangle offense were a perfect fit for Jordan. While Jackson was known for his spiritual approach to coaching, it was his basketball mind that truly clicked with Jordan. Together, they built a relationship that would soon propel the Bulls to multiple championships. Jordan's relationship with Jackson, as well as the arrival of key players like Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant, was critical to the Bulls' ascent. But there was still one thing missing: the championship. Every year, Jordan and the Bulls would fall short, most notably to the dominant Detroit Pistons in the late 80s. The Pistons, led by Isaiah Thomas, had perfected the art of beating Jordan down physically, often to the point where it seemed like no one could stop them. Yet for Jordan, failure was a lesson, not a setback. The sting of defeat against the Pistons was enough to push him even harder. His game evolved. He added more dimensions: his leadership, his passing, and his defense, all improved. Jordan no longer played just for individual glory, he played for his team, for a legacy. His personal drive became even more potent as he became determined to lift the Bulls to the top of the NBA mountain. In the next few years, the Bulls would finally break through, defeating the Pistons in 1991 to advance to the finals and win their first championship. Michael Jordan was no longer just a rising star, he had become the centerpiece of a dynasty. The world now knew what Chicago had known for years: Michael Jordan was destined for greatness. But even as he basked in the glory of his first championship, Jordan's journey was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. As the Bulls entered the 1990s, Michael Jordan's ambition was only heightened. The competitive fire that had fueled him from his early days in Wilmington was now burning stronger than ever. Jordan's story is not just one of triumph, but of a relentless pursuit of greatness. It is the story of a man who faced countless challenges and obstacles, yet always managed to overcome them. From the small-town courts of Wilmington to the bright lights of Chicago, Michael Jordan's journey was defined by an unwavering desire to be the best, and an ability to rise above every obstacle that stood in his way. The world had only seen the beginning of what was to come, and soon, the name Michael Jordan would become synonymous with greatness. By the mid-1980s, Michael Jordan had established himself as a rising star in the NBA, but the road to becoming the undisputed king of basketball was far from smooth. His explosive talent on the court was undeniable, but there was something deeper that set him apart from the rest. It was his unrelenting desire to prove himself, to be the best, and to conquer not just the game of basketball, but every challenge that came his way. The fire that burned within him was stoked by adversity, by the heartbreak of near victories and the constant push to redefine what greatness meant. Jordan's journey had always been about overcoming obstacles. His first major challenge came in the form of a sophomore slump. Despite dominating in his rookie season, he suffered an injury in 1985 that kept him sidelined for most of the year. It was a setback, but for someone like Jordan, it was more than just physical pain, it was a test of his mental toughness. The injury forced him to watch from the sidelines as other players, some of whom were seen as more polished or experienced, gained momentum. Yet, rather than wallowing in self-pity, Jordan used the time to study the game more deeply. He worked on his shot, refined his footwork, and mentally prepared himself for the moment when he could return to the court stronger than ever. When Jordan finally did come back in 1986, it was as if he had never left. His return was nothing short of spectacular. He averaged over 30 points per game and scored 63 points in a game against the Boston Celtics, the defending champions at the time. That performance remains one of the most iconic in NBA history. But what stood out more than the points he scored was the way he did it. It wasn't just about raw talent, it was about the mentality, the hunger for victory, and the refusal to back down from any challenge. Jordan wasn't just competing against other teams, he was competing against himself, constantly striving for perfection. Despite his brilliance, the team around Jordan still struggled. The Chicago Bulls were not a championship-caliber team yet, and that was a frustration Jordan could not ignore. The team had some talent, but the chemistry wasn't there. The Bulls needed more than just a superstar player. They needed a system, a structure that could turn their raw potential into championship-level success. Jordan's individual excellence was never in question, but winning a championship required more than just an individual effort. It required a collective one. That was when Phil Jackson entered the picture. Jackson, a former NBA player with a reputation for understanding the deeper aspects of the game, was hired as the head coach of the Bulls in 1989. Jackson's arrival marked a turning point in Jordan's career, as it would be Jackson's philosophical approach to basketball that would help transform the young star into a team player and, eventually, a champion. Jackson introduced the triangle offense to the Bulls, a system that emphasized movement, spacing, and unselfish passing. It was a radical departure from the traditional isolation-style offense that Jordan had been used to, but it suited him perfectly. The triangle offense took advantage of Jordan's ability to read the game, his passing vision, and his leadership. It allowed him to play off the ball more and be involved in every aspect of the game, not just scoring. But even with Jackson's coaching, the road to success was never guaranteed. The Bulls had to go through their own growing pains. In 1989, the team faced a crushing defeat at the hands of the Detroit Pistons in the Eastern Conference Finals. The Pistons, known for their rough, physical play, had perfected the art of wearing down Jordan, making it difficult for him to perform at his best. The Bad Boys of Detroit were a challenge unlike anything Jordan had faced before. They had a strategy: frustrate Jordan, get physical with him, and make him earn every point. It was a strategy that worked, at least for a while. The Pistons' victory was a blow to Jordan, but it was also a lesson. In that defeat, he saw what he needed to do to take his game to the next level. He wasn't just going to rely on his scoring ability anymore, he needed to get tougher. Jordan spent the offseason adding muscle, working on his conditioning, and refining his mental toughness. He wasn't going to let the Pistons, or anyone else, outwork him again. The 1990-91 season was a pivotal one for Jordan and the Bulls. This time, they were not only physically ready for the Pistons, but they were also mentally prepared. In the Eastern Conference Finals, the Bulls faced Detroit once again. But this time, they were different. They had a new sense of purpose, a new sense of confidence. Jordan was playing with an edge. He was no longer just the best player on the court, he was the most determined player. In a dramatic turn of events, the Bulls swept the Pistons in 4 games, a feat that was unthinkable just a year before. Jordan had finally overcome his biggest obstacle. He wasn't just the individual scoring machine that everyone knew, he was now a leader who had taken his team to the next level. It was a defining moment in his career, and it was only the beginning. In the NBA Finals, the Bulls faced the Los Angeles Lakers, led by Magic Johnson, one of the greatest players to ever play the game. The Lakers had their own dynasty, but Jordan and the Bulls were on a mission. The 1991 Finals would be Jordan's true arrival. He was no longer just a star, he was now a champion. The Bulls won the series in 5 games, and Jordan was named Finals MVP. He had done it. He had taken the Chicago Bulls to the top of the NBA, and in doing so, he had finally proven that he was the best player in the league. Jordan's performance in the 1991 Finals was a revelation. He played with an intensity and a skill level that left even the legendary Magic Johnson in awe. But it wasn't just about the stats, it was about how Jordan approached every moment. Every possession mattered to him. Every play, every second, was an opportunity to prove that he was the greatest player in the world. The 1991 Finals cemented his legacy and proved that Jordan's greatness wasn't just a matter of talent, it was about his relentless pursuit of perfection. The victory over the Lakers was a defining moment in Michael Jordan's career, but it wasn't the end. Far from it. Jordan's hunger for success, his obsession with greatness, would continue to drive him. The 1990s would become the era of Michael Jordan, a decade defined by his dominance on the court and his ability to inspire greatness in his teammates. The fire that burned within Jordan had only just begun to heat up. His competitive nature would drive him to even greater heights, pushing not only himself but also the entire NBA to new levels. From here, his journey would take him to more championships, more rivalries, and more moments that would define basketball history. But the true story of Michael Jordan was just getting started. It's a quiet afternoon in the city of Chicago. The streets are bustling with the usual city sounds, cars honking, people talking, and the hum of life continuing as it always does. In a small corner store tucked away in a neighborhood, two black teenagers walk in, browsing the shelves like any other customers. They're just looking to pick up a few snacks after school, enjoying their freedom before heading home. But what happens next is anything but ordinary. The store is a regular spot for locals, and the employees have seen it all. But that day, something shifts in the air. The store owner, wary of the boys lingering near the aisles, suspects they're loitering. To some, the sight of two black teenagers in the store without making a purchase seems suspicious. In an instant, the store owner makes a decision that will spark an event that echoes far beyond the small neighborhood store. The owner picks up the phone and calls the police, accusing the boys of loitering, of being out of place. The idea of black teens simply existing in a public space is often seen through a suspicious lens. And in this moment, the two boys find themselves at the mercy of a system that's quick to judge and slow to act with understanding. The scene unfolds slowly. The police arrive, their presence filling the space with tension. The boys are confused, unsure of what's happening. They've done nothing wrong, they're simply two teenagers on a regular day. But to them, the harshness of the moment feels overwhelming. The store owner's call has changed everything. They are now suspects, accused without reason, with their mere presence deemed a threat. In a city where young black men are often treated with suspicion, this is an all-too-familiar reality. The boys' future feels uncertain in that moment, where their identities are overshadowed by stereotypes and preconceived notions. Then, just as the situation seems poised to spiral out of control, a figure steps into the scene, someone who commands attention not through force or authority, but through respect. Michael Jordan, the face of basketball in the world and a Chicago icon, enters the store. Jordan's life and legacy have long been defined by his ability to rise above, to dominate on the basketball court, and now he's called upon to intervene in a completely different arena, the arena of race, justice, and understanding. Jordan's arrival in the store wasn't part of some grand plan. He wasn't there to make headlines, to deliver a speech, or to provide some grand gesture. He was there as a man who understood the weight of being misunderstood, the power of standing up in the face of inequality, and the responsibility that came with being in the public eye. In a city that had both celebrated and scrutinized him for years, Jordan recognized the significance of his presence in this moment. He walked up to the officers, addressed the situation calmly, and, with quiet authority, intervened. Jordan wasn't a figure of force or confrontation, he was a figure of change, of influence. He took the time to speak with the officers, to provide context, and to question why the boys had been treated this way in the first place. His action was a simple one, paying for the boys' groceries. It wasn't just about covering the cost of their food, it was about using his position to make a statement. It was a message that resonated with both the boys and the officers. Not everything is as it seems at first glance. In that moment, Jordan's decision to step in wasn't just an act of charity. It was an act of reality check. The system that so often discriminates was temporarily disrupted by a force greater than the status quo. Jordan's action gave the boys a sense of agency they hadn't expected, allowing them to walk out of the store with their heads held high, free from the heavy burden of unjust suspicion. For Jordan, this wasn't about making a public spectacle of his charity, it was about standing up for what was right, even when the world wasn't watching. He knew that, as a public figure, his actions carried weight. But it was clear to him that, in a moment like this, it was more important to use his influence to create a ripple of change than to play to the cameras or the press. His quiet gesture spoke volumes about the power of recognition, of dignity, and the way small acts of kindness can disrupt an unfair narrative. The incident quickly spread throughout the city, becoming an unexpected moment of reckoning. People in Chicago, and around the world, were reminded that even those who are seemingly immune to the struggles of everyday life could, and should, stand up against injustice. It wasn't just about Michael Jordan's fame or wealth, it was about his responsibility as a leader in a time when the world needed to see change. He didn't have to make a public statement, his actions spoke louder than words ever could. For the two teens, the experience was a turning point. It wasn't just about getting out of a sticky situation, it was about having their humanity recognized in a world that often chose not to see them as individuals, but as statistics, as stereotypes. The memory of Jordan stepping in to pay for their food wasn't just about a free meal, it was about a powerful figure using his influence to remind them that they were worth more than how society had judged them. It was a brief moment of grace in a world that often lacked it. The story didn't end there, though. While the teens moved on with their lives, Jordan's actions continued to echo in the streets of Chicago. His decision to step in during a time of racial tension wasn't just a single moment in time, it was a reflection of the ongoing fight for justice and equality. For those who had witnessed it, it was a moment of realization. The struggle for equality wasn't confined to the court or the streets, it was a struggle that permeated every aspect of society. Michael Jordan's intervention was a reminder of the power of visibility. As a figure who had transcended the game of basketball, Jordan understood that his platform came with an undeniable responsibility. He had spent his career proving that greatness could come from hard work, perseverance, and heart. But in this moment, he also proved that greatness could come from doing what was right, no matter the circumstances. In the days that followed, Jordan's action became a topic of conversation, not just in sports circles, but in the broader conversation about race, privilege, and the power of individual choices. It wasn't just about Michael Jordan standing up for two young teens, it was about what he represented. He was a man who had seen it all, the highs of championship victories, the pressure of constant scrutiny, and the weight of being a role model. But in this moment, he also understood the importance of standing up for what was just, for seeing people not as labels but as human beings deserving of dignity and respect. The incident in the grocery store was more than just a feel-good story. It was a reminder of the larger issues at play, issues that Jordan, as a public figure, had the power to influence. It was a turning point, not only for the teens involved but for Jordan himself, who realized that his voice and his actions could reach far beyond the basketball court. This wasn't just a story about one man's act of kindness, it was about the power of influence, about how one person's actions can ripple outward and create change. For Michael Jordan, it wasn't just about winning championships, it was about leaving a legacy that extended beyond the game he played. And in this quiet moment in a corner store, Jordan made a choice that spoke volumes about the kind of man he was and the kind of world he wanted to help build. By the time Michael Jordan made his NBA debut in 1984, basketball was already a beloved sport, but it was clear that something had been missing. Jordan's arrival didn't just change the way basketball was played, it changed the way it was viewed. He wasn't just a great player, he was a phenomenon in the making. From the first time he laced up his shoes for the Chicago Bulls, it was evident that Jordan wasn't just playing the game. He was redefining it. His impact was immediate. The first few seasons of Jordan's career saw him quickly emerging as a star. Despite the Chicago Bulls not being a championship-caliber team yet, Jordan's ability to dominate games, his unmatched athleticism, and his killer instinct made him the face of the NBA. It wasn't just his scoring that set him apart, it was his mentality. Jordan didn't just want to win, he wanted to destroy the competition, and he was willing to do whatever it took to ensure that happened. His competitive drive became legendary, and it was this mindset that would propel him to unprecedented heights. But it wasn't all easy. Even as Jordan's individual brilliance was undeniable, the Chicago Bulls still struggled to build a true contender. The early seasons of his career were marked by frustration, not because of his individual play but because the team couldn't find the chemistry necessary for success. Chicago was in need of more than just a star, they needed a system that could support his greatness. Enter Phil Jackson. When Jackson was hired as the Bulls head coach in 1989, it was a turning point in both the team's and Jordan's career. Jackson wasn't just another coach, he brought with him a philosophy that was revolutionary for the Bulls. The triangle offense, which had been successful with the New York Knicks and other teams, would become the foundation of the Bulls' success. Jackson's philosophy wasn't just about X's and O's, it was about creating a team dynamic, emphasizing movement, spacing, and, most importantly, trust. For Jordan, adapting to Jackson's triangle offense wasn't easy at first. He had spent much of his early career playing an isolation game, where he was the primary focus, and he could dictate the tempo of the game through his own brilliance. Now, he had to share the ball more, let other players get involved, and trust his teammates in ways he hadn't before. But Jordan wasn't a player to back down from a challenge. Slowly, he began to see the value of the system. His scoring was still his bread and butter, but the triangle offense allowed him to use his passing, court vision, and leadership to elevate his teammates. Jordan's relationship with Jackson grew into something special. Jackson wasn't just a coach, he became a mentor, someone who helped Jordan see the game in a different way. While their approach to the game was radically different from the previous coaching staff, Jackson understood that Jordan's greatness came from his confidence and his competitive fire. Under Jackson's guidance, Jordan evolved from a dominant scorer to a leader who could elevate the entire team. The Bulls' transformation under Jackson was swift. In the 1990-91 season, the team finally broke through. After years of playoff disappointments, including losing to the Detroit Pistons in the Eastern Conference Finals, the Bulls finally found themselves at the top of the NBA mountain. The road to the finals was filled with challenges, but none more significant than their matchup with the Pistons. Detroit had been Jordan's nemesis for years. They were a team that used physicality to frustrate him, but this time, the Bulls were ready. The Bulls swept the Pistons in the Eastern Conference Finals, a shocking and satisfying result for Jordan, who had spent years trying to overcome the bad boys of Detroit. For Jordan, this was more than just a victory, it was proof that he had grown, that he had learned how to win not just through individual brilliance but through teamwork and leadership. The Pistons were no longer a threat, and the Bulls, with Jordan at the helm, were finally a force to be reckoned with. In the 1991 NBA Finals, the Bulls faced off against the Los Angeles Lakers, led by Magic Johnson. The Lakers were the epitome of NBA greatness, having won multiple championships throughout the 80s. They were a well-oiled machine, a team that had mastered the art of winning. But the Bulls were hungry, and Michael Jordan was on a mission. The series wasn't just about winning, it was about making a statement. Jordan was determined to prove that not only could he lead his team to a championship, but he could dominate the finals. Jordan delivered in every possible way. He was a force on both ends of the floor, and his 1991 Finals performance remains one of the most iconic in NBA history. He averaged 31.2 points per game and was named Finals MVP. The Bulls won the series in 5 games, cementing their place as the NBA champions. For Jordan, this victory was the culmination of years of hard work, setbacks, and growth. He had finally reached the pinnacle, and the NBA was now his domain. But Jordan's journey didn't end with one championship. He was just getting started. The 1990s would become the decade of Michael Jordan. The next few years would see the Bulls become the most dominant team in the NBA, winning 6 championships in 8 years. Jordan's impact on the game grew exponentially. He wasn't just a basketball player, he was a global icon. His marketability reached new heights, especially with the introduction of the Air Jordan brand. His association with Nike brought about a revolution in the sneaker industry, and the Air Jordan line became one of the most popular and lucrative endorsements in sports history. Jordan's success wasn't just about basketball, it was about breaking boundaries and expanding the reach of the sport. He was a trendsetter, a cultural figure who transcended the game. His combination of skill, charisma, and business savvy made him a worldwide sensation. The Air Jordan brand became synonymous with greatness, and its influence could be seen not only in basketball but in fashion, music, and culture at large. However, with all the fame and success came the pressure. The expectations placed on Jordan were immense, and the weight of it all began to take its toll. The more Jordan won, the more people expected from him. But for Jordan, this was part of the deal. The drive to win never waned. His relentless work ethic, his obsession with being the best, was what kept him at the top of his game. He didn't rest on his laurels, he constantly sought ways to improve. The 1990s saw Jordan continue to raise the bar, pushing both himself and his teammates to new heights. He was no longer just a player on a team, he was the heart and soul of the Chicago Bulls. His leadership was crucial to their success. The Bulls were no longer just a collection of talented players, they were a cohesive unit, and it was Jordan's ability to bring them together that allowed them to become a dynasty. His dedication to winning, his refusal to settle for mediocrity, and his unmatched skill on the court were the cornerstones of the Bulls' success. But even as the championships piled up, Jordan's hunger for greatness never subsided. His evolution as a player, as a leader, and as a cultural icon was a testament to his unrelenting pursuit of excellence. The Chicago Bulls had become a dynasty, and Michael Jordan had become the greatest basketball player the world had ever seen. In the mid-1990s, Jordan faced an unexpected challenge. He stepped away from the game in 1993, a decision that shocked the basketball world. The reasons behind his retirement were multifaceted, including the tragic murder of his father, James Jordan, and a desire to step away from the pressures of being the world's most famous athlete. But even in retirement, Jordan's legacy continued to grow. His time away from the game didn't diminish his place in history, it only made the world more eager for his return. Jordan's decision to return to basketball in 1995 was a moment that would define his career. He came back to the Chicago Bulls at a time when the team was in transition, and his return sparked a renewed sense of purpose. Jordan wasn't just a basketball player, he was the embodiment of excellence. His comeback story would become one of the most remarkable in sports history, as he would go on to win 3 more championships with the Bulls, proving that even after a brief hiatus, he was still the greatest. By the end of the decade, Michael Jordan had achieved everything a basketball player could dream of: 6 championships, 5 MVP awards, and countless accolades. But it wasn't just about the titles. Jordan's legacy was about redefining what it meant to be a champion. It was about pushing boundaries, setting standards, and inspiring generations of athletes to come. He had broken the mold, and in doing so, he had forever changed the game of basketball. Michael Jordan's journey from a talented yet single-minded player to a global icon wasn't without its pitfalls. The late 1980s and early 1990s marked a turning point in both his career and the Chicago Bulls' transformation into a dynasty. Despite his individual brilliance, Jordan was still searching for that elusive championship, and he wasn't going to stop until he got there. Yet, for all his talent and determination, the team around him wasn't always on the same page. It wasn't until a few key changes and the arrival of a new coach that the true potential of the Bulls was realized. The first part of the 1990s was filled with frustration for the Chicago Bulls. While Michael Jordan had firmly established himself as the best player in the NBA, the team had yet to put it all together for a championship run. The Chicago Bulls were consistently making the playoffs but couldn't get over the hump. Every year, they fell short. In 1989, they were handed a brutal defeat by the Detroit Pistons, who became their nemesis. The Pistons were the epitome of tough, physical basketball, and they had Jordan's number. Their defensive scheme, known as the Jordan Rules, was designed to frustrate and beat up Michael at every turn. The plan worked. The Bulls could never find a way to break through the Pistons' defense, and each year, it felt like the championship slipped further out of reach. The rivalry between the Bulls and the Pistons became one of the most intense in NBA history. The games were physical, often crossing the line into outright violence. Jordan found himself battered and bruised at the hands of the Pistons, who played to break him down mentally and physically. But every defeat was a learning experience for Jordan. Instead of sulking or accepting the status quo, he used the pain of those losses to fuel his next moves. Jordan realized that if he was going to win, it wouldn't be enough to outscore his opponents, he would have to outlast them. He had to develop a tougher mentality and improve the physical aspects of his game. Jordan's transformation didn't just come on the basketball court. It was off the court as well. The summer after the Bulls' defeat to the Pistons in 1989, Jordan dedicated himself to improving his body. He hit the gym with renewed intensity, gaining muscle and strength that would help him withstand the physicality of the Pistons' defense. He also began working on his leadership, learning how to get his teammates to buy into his vision. In a way, Jordan had always been a solo performer, relying on his own brilliance to carry the Bulls. But to win a championship, he would need more than just himself, he would need the entire team to step up. The following season, the arrival of Phil Jackson as head coach would provide the missing link. Jackson wasn't just any coach. He was a Zen master, a man who understood that basketball wasn't just a game of X's and O's, it was a mental battle. His approach to coaching was rooted in mindfulness, teamwork, and the power of the collective. Jackson's philosophy was starkly different from anything the Bulls had experienced before. Instead of focusing on Jordan as the sole leader of the team, Jackson emphasized a collective approach to basketball, one in which every player had a role to play. Jordan would still be the team's focal point, but now the entire team would be expected to contribute. Jackson's triangle offense, which emphasized spacing, ball movement, and creating opportunities for everyone, was the system that would make it all click. The Bulls' transformation was quick and dramatic. In the 1990-91 season, with Jackson at the helm and Jordan fully invested in the system, the team came together in a way that had never been seen before. The Bulls swept through the playoffs, defeating the Detroit Pistons in the Eastern Conference Finals in 4 games. It was a moment of sheer redemption for Jordan, who had spent years struggling against the Pistons' defense. With Jackson's guidance and his own growth as a leader, Jordan had finally overcome the biggest hurdle in his career. The 1991 NBA Finals, which pitted the Bulls against the Los Angeles Lakers, were the culmination of everything Jordan had worked for. The Lakers, led by Magic Johnson, were an established dynasty, and the Bulls were hungry to prove themselves. The finals were a statement from Jordan and his team. They didn't just want to win, they wanted to dominate. The Bulls clinched the series in 5 games, with Jordan's performance being the highlight of the finals. He averaged 31.2 points per game and was named the finals MVP. His performance wasn't just about scoring, it was about leadership, about proving that he was not just the best player in the NBA but also the best player on the biggest stage. Winning the first championship was a breakthrough for Jordan, but it wasn't the end of his journey. The next several years would see the Bulls rise to the pinnacle of the NBA, winning championship after championship. The 1990s were defined by Jordan's dominance, both as a player and as a leader. With each passing year, the Bulls grew stronger, and Jordan became more determined to win, not just for himself but for his teammates, for the city of Chicago, and for his place in basketball history. The second three-peat, which began in 1996, was even more impressive than the first. By this point, Jordan was no longer just a scoring machine, he had become a complete player, capable of leading his team on both ends of the floor. The Bulls were not just an offensive juggernaut, they were a defensive powerhouse as well. With players like Scottie Pippen and Ron Harper alongside him, the Bulls became one of the most well-rounded teams in NBA history. Jordan was still the centerpiece, but now the team played with a unity and cohesion that made them nearly unstoppable. Despite the success, there were moments of doubt and frustration along the way. The 1997-98 season, which would eventually be the final season of the Bulls dynasty, was filled with internal conflict. Jackson was ready to move on, and rumors of Jordan's retirement swirled. The pressure of maintaining a championship-level team had taken its toll on both the players and the coaching staff. But Jordan, always the competitor, refused to let the dynasty crumble. He led the Bulls to their 6th championship, cementing their legacy as one of the greatest teams of all time. But after the 1998 season, the dynasty was officially over. Jackson left the team, and Jordan retired once again, this time for good. The end of the Bulls dynasty marked the end of an era in basketball. For Jordan, it was the culmination of everything he had worked for. He had not only built one of the greatest dynasties in sports history but had also redefined what it meant to be a champion. The Bulls' success under Jordan wasn't just about the victories, it was about the mentality that drove them to greatness. In the years that followed, Jordan's legacy would only grow stronger. The lessons he imparted on leadership, perseverance, and teamwork would continue to inspire future generations of basketball players. But the story of the Chicago Bulls dynasty wasn't just about the championships. It was about the journey, the heartbreaks, the growth, and the unrelenting desire to be the best. Michael Jordan's career was more than just about winning, it was about proving that greatness was possible with the right mindset, the right leadership, and the right teammates. The rebirth of the Chicago Bulls under Jordan's leadership was not just a triumph of basketball skill, it was a triumph of will, determination, and character. In the face of adversity, Jordan and the Bulls had risen to the top, creating a dynasty that would be remembered for generations. And while the dynasty may have come to an end, the impact of those years would last forever. By the time Michael Jordan had reached the peak of his career in the early 1990s, the NBA landscape had shifted significantly. The world had already started to see him as one of the greatest players in the history of the sport, but for Jordan, greatness wasn't just about winning, it was about pushing the boundaries of what was possible. As he continued to dominate the league, his rivalries, his competitive fire, and his pursuit of perfection would become integral parts of his legacy. One of the most defining features of Jordan's career was his intense rivalry with other elite players. The NBA in the 1990s was filled with some of the best basketball players to ever grace the court, and Jordan found himself competing against some of them for the title of best player in the world. This competition wasn't just about individual accolades, it was about legacy, about carving out a place in history. And Jordan's biggest competitors were always those who had something to prove, who pushed him to elevate his game even further. The Pistons' Bad Boys. Perhaps the fiercest and most notorious rivalry of Jordan's career was with the Detroit Pistons. The Pistons were a team built on toughness, physicality, and a relentless defense. Their strategy, famously known as the Jordan Rules, was simple: stop Jordan at all costs. The idea was to push him, hit him, and make his life miserable on the court. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, when Jordan was still finding his way in the NBA, the Pistons were the ultimate hurdle. Detroit's defense was brutal, and they made it clear that Jordan wasn't going to get an easy path to the finals. Year after year, the Pistons would defeat the Bulls in the playoffs, relying on their physicality to wear Jordan down. Each defeat was a blow to Jordan's confidence and ambition, but it also served as a learning experience. The challenge of trying to overcome the Bad Boys was exactly what Jordan needed to take his game to the next level. He became more determined, more resilient, and more focused on improving his all-around game. Instead of just focusing on scoring, Jordan worked on his passing, his defense, and his ability to involve his teammates. He knew that in order to beat the Pistons, he had to become more than just a scorer. In 1991, the Bulls finally broke through. They defeated the Pistons in a 4-game sweep, sending them to the NBA Finals. The victory was a massive statement, not just for the Bulls but for Jordan's personal growth. It was a testament to his resilience, his refusal to be outworked, and his ability to adapt to the toughest challenges. Beating the Pistons was the key moment that marked Jordan's ascent to greatness. He had proven that no obstacle, no matter how tough, was too big for him to overcome. The New York Knicks and Reggie Miller's Pacers. Following the Bulls' victory over the Pistons, Jordan's next significant challenge came in the form of the New York Knicks. The Knicks, led by Pat Riley, were a gritty, defensive-oriented team that had no intention of making it easy for Jordan. The rivalry between the Bulls and the Knicks was defined by hard-fought playoff battles that saw both teams engaged in brutal, physical matchups. The Knicks were known for their tough defense, led by players like Charles Oakley, Patrick Ewing, and John Starks. But despite the Knicks' strength and defensive prowess, the Bulls proved to be the more skilled and cohesive team. During the 1992-1993 season, the Bulls and Knicks faced off in a dramatic 7-game series. The series was filled with intense moments, but it was Jordan who came through in the clutch, proving once again that he thrived under pressure. His scoring, leadership, and determination were too much for the Knicks to handle, and the Bulls advanced to the next round. However, this series left its mark on Jordan. The Knicks were a team that didn't shy away from pushing Jordan to his limits. They played physical, hard-nosed basketball, and it was clear that in order to continue winning championships, Jordan would need to become even more focused on his mental and physical conditioning. Similarly, Jordan faced challenges from other Eastern Conference teams, notably Reggie Miller's Indiana Pacers. The Pacers were a formidable team, led by one of the most clutch shooters in NBA history. Miller's ability to hit big shots in crucial moments made him one of the toughest opponents for Jordan. The Pacers' playoff battles with the Bulls in the 1990s were always intense, but it was Jordan's ability to step up when it mattered most that allowed the Bulls to prevail. The rivalry with the Pacers reinforced the notion that Jordan didn't just win games, he won in the clutch, with the game on the line. The return of the King, the 1995-96 season. After briefly retiring from basketball following the tragic murder of his father, James Jordan Sr., Michael Jordan returned to the NBA in 1995. The announcement of his return sent shockwaves throughout the league. His brief hiatus had only increased his mystique, and when he returned, he came back with a renewed sense of purpose. The 1995-96 season was one of Jordan's most remarkable, as he led the Bulls to their fourth NBA championship. But the 1995-96 season wasn't just about Jordan's return, it was about the rebirth of the Bulls as an elite team. With the addition of players like Ron Harper, Steve Kerr, and a growing chemistry with Scottie Pippen, the Bulls quickly became a force to be reckoned with. Under the guidance of Phil Jackson, the team embraced the triangle offense and became more than just a collection of talented players. They were a true team, unified by their shared goal of winning. Jordan, however, remained the focal point. His dominance on the court was unmatched, and his leadership was more refined than ever. He wasn't just the best player on the team, he was the heart and soul of it. The 1995-96 Chicago Bulls were a well-oiled machine, one that could beat teams in many different ways. The team finished the regular season with an incredible 72-10 record, setting a new NBA record for wins in a single season. This marked the beginning of the second three-peat, with Jordan leading the way. Facing the Utah Jazz in the finals. In the 1997 and 1998 NBA Finals, the Chicago Bulls found themselves up against a new challenge, the Utah Jazz. The Jazz, led by Hall of Famers Karl Malone and John Stockton, were one of the most balanced teams in the NBA. Their combination of skill, experience, and teamwork made them a formidable opponent for the Bulls. But once again, it was Jordan who proved to be the difference-maker. The 1997 Finals saw Jordan deliver one of the most iconic performances in NBA history, the flu game. With the Bulls facing a 3-2 deficit in the series, Jordan played through what appeared to be flu-like symptoms, scoring 38 points and leading the Bulls to a crucial Game 5 victory. The game became a defining moment in Jordan's legacy, showcasing his unparalleled will to win and his ability to perform at the highest level, even under the most difficult circumstances. In the 1998 Finals, Jordan once again led the Bulls to victory, clinching his sixth and final NBA championship. His performance in Game 6 of the Finals was a testament to his greatness. In the final moments of the game, with the score tied, Jordan hit a clutch shot over Utah's Byron Russell, giving the Bulls the lead and securing the championship. The shot was the perfect encapsulation of Jordan's career, dominant, clutch, and determined. The final act of greatness. Jordan's rivalry with the best players of his era had defined the second half of his career. His battles with the Pistons, the Knicks, the Pacers, and the Jazz were all part of his journey to becoming the greatest of all time. These rivalries pushed him to his limits, forcing him to become a better player, leader, and teammate. Each rivalry shaped Jordan's legacy, from his early struggles to his final championship. By the end of his career, Jordan had become more than just a basketball player. He had become a symbol of greatness, of resilience, and of the relentless pursuit of excellence. The rivalries, the pressure, and the emotional highs and lows had all contributed to shaping him into the player he became. Through every challenge, every defeat, and every victory, Jordan had proven time and again that he was the best. The rivalries he faced were not just obstacles, they were stepping stones on his path to immortality. The 1997-98 season marked the end of an era for the Chicago Bulls. Michael Jordan, now an NBA legend with 5 MVPs, 5 Finals MVPs, and countless accolades, was preparing for what would be his final championship run with the team. But this season was different. It wasn't just about the pursuit of another title, it was about closure. The Bulls' roster was aging, with key pieces like Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman nearing the end of their careers, and the team was facing uncertainty. Would this truly be Jordan's last season with the Bulls? Would the team, after dominating the NBA for nearly a decade, be able to achieve the unthinkable, a second three-peat? As the season unfolded, it became clear that this team had more than just talent, it had a purpose. The 1997-98 Chicago Bulls were more than just a collection of players, they were a dynasty on the verge of ending. For Michael Jordan, this wasn't just another championship pursuit, it was his chance to solidify his legacy as the greatest player in basketball history. The intensity of his drive had only intensified with age, and his commitment to winning remained unwavering. The season began with tension surrounding the future of the team. Bulls general manager Jerry Krause, who had been instrumental in building the championship-winning roster, had already declared that this would be the final season for the current coaching staff, led by Phil Jackson. In what seemed like an attempt to control the narrative, Krause wanted to move on from Jackson, despite the coach's success with the team. The announcement created a rift between Krause and the players, particularly Jordan, who made it clear that if Jackson wasn't coming back, neither would he. Jackson's presence was integral to the team's success, and Jordan's loyalty to him was unwavering. The Bulls' 1997-98 campaign was one of transition. With the team in flux, Jordan's leadership became more critical than ever. His competitiveness, his drive, and his ability to carry a team were on full display. Despite the internal conflicts, the team played exceptionally well, finishing the regular season with a 62-20 record. Jordan's individual performance was once again a testament to his dominance. He was still, at the age of 35, the best player in the world. Yet, even with his brilliance, it was clear that this was more than just a battle for another championship, it was a battle against time. The 1997-98 season also saw the emergence of new challenges. Teams like the Indiana Pacers and the New York Knicks were gaining momentum, while the Utah Jazz, led by Hall of Famers Karl Malone and John Stockton, posed a serious threat in the finals. But despite these growing threats, Jordan remained focused on one goal, to finish what he had started, to win one final championship and cement his legacy as the greatest of all time. It wasn't just Jordan's play on the court that made him stand out during this season. It was his ability to inspire and lead. He had become the driving force behind the team, pushing his teammates to elevate their games. The chemistry between him, Pippen, and Rodman was unmatched, and even though they were facing their own challenges, they understood the stakes. They knew that this was the end of their run, and they were determined to make the most of it. The tension was palpable, but it only fueled the team's resolve. The culmination of this season was, of course, the NBA Finals. For the second time in 3 years, the Chicago Bulls would face the Utah Jazz for the championship. The 1998 Finals would prove to be a defining moment for Michael Jordan, as it was the last time he would wear a Bulls jersey in a competitive game. With the series tied at 2-2, it all came down to Game 5. The Bulls were facing an incredibly tough opponent in the Jazz, who had taken the Bulls to the brink. The game was tied, and the championship was in the balance. With less than a minute remaining in Game 5, the ball was in Jordan's hands. Everyone knew what was coming. Jordan had delivered countless game-winning shots throughout his career, and this would be no different. With the shot clock winding down, Jordan dribbled to the top of the key, sizing up his defender, Byron Russell. The arena held its breath as Jordan made his move, pulling up for a jump shot. The ball sailed through the air and swished through the net, giving the Bulls a 1-point lead with 5.2 seconds left. It was the signature moment of Jordan's career, the shot that would define his legacy and solidify his place in history. In Game 6, Jordan and the Bulls sealed the championship, winning their 6th title in 8 years. Jordan was once again named Finals MVP, further cementing his status as the best player in NBA history. It was a storybook ending to a legendary career. With his 6th title, Jordan had accomplished everything he set out to achieve. He had led the Bulls to dominance, proven himself as the ultimate competitor, and secured his place as the greatest basketball player of all time. But the ending of this championship run also marked a turning point for Jordan. After the 1998 season, Jordan made the decision to retire once again, this time for good. He would step away from the game, leaving behind a legacy that would be nearly impossible to surpass. Jordan's departure from the game was not just the end of his career, it was the end of an era in basketball. The Chicago Bulls, after 6 championships and countless memories, would now have to find a way to move forward without their leader. As the dust settled from the 1998 finals, the world began to reflect on Michael Jordan's impact on the game of basketball. His legacy was not just built on championships or individual accolades, it was built on his relentless drive, his ability to inspire greatness in others, and his unmatched work ethic. Jordan had elevated the game to new heights, and he had made basketball a global phenomenon. His influence could be seen not only on the court but in the way the sport had transformed into a global industry. For those who had grown up watching Jordan dominate the court, the 1998 season marked the end of an era. The Chicago Bulls had become synonymous with excellence, and Jordan had become more than just a player, he had become a cultural icon. The impact of his career went far beyond basketball. It was about the way he inspired millions of people to reach for greatness, to never settle for anything less than the best. Years later, when The Last Dance documentary was released in 2020, it provided the world with a behind-the-scenes look at Jordan's final season with the Bulls. The documentary, which followed the team's 1997-98 campaign, highlighted not only Jordan's brilliance on the court but also the internal struggles and challenges the team faced as they pursued their final championship. It was a poignant reminder of the sacrifices, the pressures, and the determination that defined Jordan's career. For Jordan, his retirement after the 1998 season wasn't just the end of a chapter, it was the closing of an era in basketball. The NBA would never be the same, and neither would the world of sports. Jordan's legacy was now solidified, and the stories of his greatness would be passed down to future generations of basketball players and fans. But despite his retirement, Jordan's influence never truly faded. His impact on the sport was too great, his legacy too enduring. Even as time went on, the world continued to recognize Michael Jordan as the greatest basketball player to ever play the game, and his story would forever be intertwined with the history of the NBA. The Last Dance may have been the end of an era, but Michael Jordan's influence would never truly fade. His legacy had been built on his ability to win, to lead, and to inspire. And it was this legacy that would continue to shape the future of basketball for generations to come. Michael Jordan's career wasn't just defined by his basketball achievements, it was shaped by the way he transformed the game itself, becoming a cultural phenomenon that transcended sports. By the time Jordan retired for the final time in 1999, he had not only won 6 NBA championships and 5 MVP awards, but he had changed the way people thought about athleticism, competition, and the power of individual excellence. The world had watched him grow from a talented college player at the University of North Carolina to the undisputed king of basketball, leading the Chicago Bulls to one of the most successful dynasties in sports history. But his impact extended far beyond the basketball court. The 1990s saw Jordan's fame reach new heights. His role in popularizing the NBA globally cannot be overstated. During his reign, the NBA grew exponentially in terms of viewership, commercial deals, and global recognition. Jordan's basketball shoes, the Air Jordans, became not just a product, but a cultural staple. They were more than just footwear. They were a symbol of excellence, success, and status. Jordan was everywhere, on TV, in commercials, in movies, and in the global consciousness. His face was the face of basketball, and his name was synonymous with greatness. But even beyond the merchandise and the commercials, Jordan's influence went deeper. He taught the world that greatness wasn't just about talent, it was about work ethic, mental toughness, and an unyielding desire to be the best. His story became an inspiration for athletes in every sport, and his relentless pursuit of perfection became a model for future generations. Young athletes didn't just want to be like Mike because of his championships, they wanted to be like Mike because of his focus, his discipline, and his ability to rise above every challenge that stood in his way. Jordan's ability to bounce back from adversity was as central to his legacy as his victories. His first retirement in 1993, following the tragic murder of his father, James Jordan Sr., was a poignant reminder that even the greatest could be humbled by life's unforeseen challenges. But Jordan's return to the NBA in 1995, at the peak of his physical and mental strength, proved that he was more than just a basketball player. He was a symbol of resilience. It was his refusal to let personal tragedies define him that made his second comeback so powerful. When Jordan returned in 1995, he had something to prove, not just to his critics, but to himself. And once again, he demonstrated his greatness by leading the Bulls to 3 more championships in 1996, 1997, and 1998. As the 1990s came to a close, the Chicago Bulls dynasty came to an end. Jordan's decision to retire for a second time in 1999 marked the conclusion of one of the most legendary runs in sports history. The world was left to reflect on what they had witnessed, the unparalleled dominance of an athlete who had redefined the sport of basketball. But the question remained, how would the game move forward without him? In the years following his retirement, Jordan's impact remained ever-present. Basketball continued to evolve, with new stars like Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, and Stephen Curry rising to prominence. Each one, in their own way, was shaped by Jordan's legacy. Kobe Bryant, in particular, looked up to Jordan as a mentor and modeled his own game after Jordan's tenacity, work ethic, and competitiveness. LeBron James, widely regarded as the heir to Jordan's throne, has often cited Jordan as his inspiration, and even in the face of his own greatness, LeBron always found ways to acknowledge Jordan's towering influence on the game. But it wasn't just on the court where Jordan left his mark. Off the court, Jordan's influence was equally profound. His transition into business, particularly with Nike and the creation of the Air Jordan brand, was a game-changer in the world of sports endorsements. Before Jordan, athletes were rarely seen as marketable figures in the way that he was. Through his endorsement deals, his involvement in philanthropic efforts, and his strategic business moves, Jordan became one of the wealthiest and most influential athletes in history. He showed that being a sports icon was more than just about performance, it was about creating a legacy that extended beyond the sport itself. Jordan's post-basketball career also saw him involved in various endeavors. He became the principal owner of the Charlotte Hornets, bringing his expertise, business acumen, and love for the game into the world of team ownership. While his time with the Hornets has been met with mixed results on the court, his leadership in reshaping the franchise's culture has been evident. His understanding of what it takes to succeed at the highest level continues to influence his decisions as an owner, even as he navigates the challenges of team management. Throughout all of this, Jordan remained a figure of intrigue. Documentaries, biographies, and countless articles have been dedicated to his life and career, and in 2020, the release of The Last Dance, a documentary about the 1997-98 Bulls season, captivated millions. The documentary offered an intimate and candid look into Jordan's final championship run with the Bulls, showing not just his greatness, but his complexities. It painted a picture of a man who was driven by an insatiable need to win, even at the cost of personal relationships. The film also shed light on the dynamics of the Bulls dynasty and gave fans an inside look at the personalities that helped propel the team to greatness. For Jordan, the release of The Last Dance was a full-circle moment. It allowed him to reflect on his journey, not just as a player but as a person who had experienced both the highs and the lows of public life. His career had been marked by controversy and scrutiny, but as the documentary unfolded, it became clear that Jordan's uncompromising nature was not something to be viewed negatively. It was something that had driven him to be the best. He had always been determined to prove people wrong, to break down barriers, and to set new standards. The Last Dance was not just a look back at his basketball achievements, it was a testament to the legacy he had built, not just as a player but as a cultural icon. As the years went by, Jordan's status as the greatest basketball player of all time remained largely uncontested. While debates about the GOAT, greatest of all time, often center around Jordan, LeBron, and others, there's a universal recognition that Jordan's influence on the game is unmatched. He didn't just win championships, he transformed the way people saw athletes, the way they saw competition, and the way they saw basketball. He was the player who made you believe that anything was possible if you worked hard enough, and he made the world sit up and take notice of the power of sports to inspire. Jordan's legacy will always be remembered through his incredible performances, his clutch moments, and his fierce competitiveness. But what truly sets him apart is the fact that his greatness was never confined to the court. Michael Jordan's story is not just one of championships and accolades. It's a story of resilience, of overcoming adversity, and of pushing the limits of what was possible. It's a story of a man who, through his determination and relentless pursuit of excellence, changed the game forever. And that's why, when people look back on Michael Jordan's career, it isn't just about the 6 championships, the 5 MVPs, or the countless iconic moments. It's about the legacy of greatness that he left behind, a legacy that continues to inspire athletes, fans, and people all over the world. Michael Jordan's name will forever be synonymous with the very idea of excellence. His story, though concluded, will never truly end.